Get out, now, or you're going to die in there. Jamal's voice cracked from smoke and panic, his fists pounding against the hood of a fire truck that hadn't yet moved. The street was chaos. Heat shimmered off the pavement. Sirens wailed, but didn't get closer. Neighbors shouted names, loved ones, missing pets, and ash floated like strange soft snow. But the house kept burning, the old Marlowe place. A crumbling porch, vines on its frame like veins, now swallowed by flame. The fire had started fast, no warning, no chance to think. Jamal had barely escaped with his mother, dragging her out by the elbow, her nightgown scorched at the hem. Others weren't so lucky. Someone said the schoolteacher was still inside. Someone else screamed about a baby, but nobody knew. Smoke blurred the truth, and then, through the flickering orange and the sound of cracking timber, the dog appeared. Nobody remembered its name at first. It had been part of the neighborhood so long, people stopped really noticing. A mutt with one torn ear and cloudy eyes. Thin, dusty, always curled beneath the sycamore on Fifth. Old as the Marlowe porch, quiet as memory. "Is that Cinder's dog?" asked Noreen, voice half-gone. "Isn't she dead?" No one answered. The dog paused at the burning doorway, then without hesitation ran inside. Jamal's mouth opened to shout, "But what do you yell at an old dog running toward fire?" The crowd held its breath. Seconds stretched. The roof groaned. Someone sobbed into their sleeve. And just when they'd begun to believe the dog would never return, when the flames hissed higher and the doorway vanished in a blink of sparks, it came back. Its fur blackened, paws bleeding. Something clutched in its jaw. People stepped forward, then froze. It wasn't a baby, not a person, not even anything living. It was a crumpled flannel bundle, soaked in smoke, streaked with ash, and inside it, half-scorched but unmistakable, was a photograph, an old one. Jamal's knees gave out. "That's my sister," he whispered. "That photo was lost 17 years ago." And the dog, breathing shallowly, lay down at his feet, never took its eyes off him. The fire burned on. But now something else had begun. The photograph shook in Jamal's hands. Its corners were seared, the paper curling from heat, but the image remained. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, smiling, with her head tilted just so her front teeth missing, arms looped around a bigger version of himself. That flannel bundle, he remembered it now. His mother had sewn it herself, years ago, when they still lived on the edge of the block, before grief changed everything. It was the only photo of Leela he had left after the fire that took her, or so he thought. The old dog Cinder, they were calling her now, lay still, chest rising in shallow jerks. She didn't cry or whimper, just stared, as if she knew, as if she remembered what they had all tried to forget. Noreen pressed her hands to her mouth, whispering something about angels and second chances. But Jamal wasn't listening anymore. He knelt beside the dog, brushing ash from her muzzle with fingers that shook more than the air around them. "She went back," he muttered 17 years later. "She went back." Cinder's gaze never left his. Her breathing slowed, almost peaceful now, like something had been resolved. The flames behind them were finally losing the fight. Water hissed against the embers as the trucks arrived, too late to matter. Firefighters shouted, hoses swung, but no one looked away from the small, burned dog on the pavement or the boy-now man who held the memory she'd rescued. Someone knelt beside him, a hand on his shoulder. Officer Morales, younger than Jamal, remembered, but eyes heavy with the same wariness of someone who'd seen too many endings. He crouched low, voice soft. "Jamal, that house was condemned. No one's lived in it since the Marlowes moved out 6 months ago." "I know," Jamal said, still not looking up. Morales waited. "So, what was the dog doing in there?" Jamal's fingers clenched around the photo. The smoke had dried out his throat, but he managed to speak. "I think she remembered where it was hidden. My sister, she always kept it in the hollow stair, just below the 3rd step. We used to hide notes there." 17 years, Morales murmured, "and she remembered. She always waited on our street, never barked, never begged, just lay there. I used to think she was just another stray. But now, he wasn't sure." Memories came rushing back. Leela feeding her pieces of toast, tying a ribbon around her tail. The way Cinder used to follow her like a shadow. He hadn't seen that dog since the fire. Hadn't thought she'd survived it, but maybe she had never left. A sudden hush rolled through the crowd. Heads turned from the other side of the street. An elderly man stepped forward. Slow, measured steps, cane tapping against pavement. Mr. Hargrove, the retired postman who lived alone near the corner. People said he was half-blind and not all there. But now, with the flames dying and the air thick with memory, he seemed more solid than anyone. "She came to me the day after your house burned," he said, voice creaking like dry wood, singed fur limping. "Just lay on my porch, didn't eat for 2 days." Jamal looked up. "I didn't know what to do," Hargrove continued, "so I let her stay. Figured if she wanted to leave she would, but she never did. Every morning, same thing. She'd walk back to the ashes, sit by the steps, wait for what? I asked myself that a lot. Sometimes, I thought she was waiting for her." Hargrove nodded toward the photo. "But maybe it wasn't that. Maybe she was waiting until someone saw." Jamal stared at the ground. The concrete was stained with soot and the blood from the pads of Cinder's feet. She hadn't moved. She brought it back, he whispered. All this time we forgot. We moved on, but she didn't. From behind them, Jamal's mother, frail and shaking, stepped forward with her hands trembling like brittle paper. She hadn't spoken much in years, not since Leela's death. But now she crouched beside the dog, brushing a curl of burnt fur from Cinder's brow. She never forgot my daughter, she said, voice thick, and we didn't even remember her name. The fire was out now. Only steam rose from the wreckage. The house had collapsed in on itself, broken and empty, but something had been pulled from it, not just the photo, not just a relic, something older, something they'd buried, unknowingly, beneath time and silence. Cinder stirred once, and a quiet exhale left her body, not a whine, not a cry, just breath, soft, steady. Final dot. The wind shifted. Ash lifted from the pavement in swirls, like dust dancing in evening light. She waited 17 years, Jamal said, standing slowly, to bring back one memory, one proof that she existed, that Leela existed. And as the crowd stood in silence, as smoke faded into the deepening sky, the old postman whispered what no one else could say out loud. Sometimes, the ones we forget are the ones who remember us longest. The photograph trembled in Jamal's grip as if it, too, had something more to say, but it didn't have to. The dog had already said enough. The photograph lay limp in Jamal's trembling hands, edges curling from the heat. He barely heard the voices around him, calls for water, for medics, for more hoses. Everything had dulled, as though he were underwater. The image was old, soft with time even before the fire got to it, but unmistakable. His sister Talia, 7 years old in that picture, missing teeth, her arm flung around the neck of that same dog, younger then, darker, not yet grayed at the muzzle. They'd taken the photo on her last birthday. It was the day before everything fell apart. He swallowed hard. There was a reason he hadn't been back to this neighborhood in over a decade. A reason the Marlowe house, abandoned all this time, still made his throat tighten when he saw it, even before it caught fire. That photo shouldn't have been here. It had burned with her, or so he'd thought. Beside him the dog lay silent. Not a whine, not a whimper. Its chest rose shallowly. People were still shouting, still running, but a hush formed in the space around Jamal and the dog, like time had folded in on itself. Noreen crouched down beside him. Her face was streaked with soot, eyes swollen from smoke and something deeper. She reached out, touching the edge of the flannel wrap with the tips of her fingers. That doggy never left this street, never, after Talia, after the fire. It stayed, wouldn't go near anyone. Slept outside the old house like it was. Waiting. Jamal didn't speak. His throat had locked around the weight of things unsaid. That night had hollowed something in him, something he never found again. He had been 15. There'd been shouting, not all of it innocent. A kitchen accident, the police said. But he remembered the smell of alcohol, the way his father's shadow had moved across the hallway, how the screams had cut off too fast. Then the smoke, then silence. The wind shifted. The fire crackled louder. Flames licked the top floors now. A charred beam collapsed inward, throwing sparks into the street. The dog didn't flinch. Then something shifted. The dog stirred, lifted its head just barely and looked directly at Jamal, and tried to stand. Jamal moved quickly, his hands under the old dog's shoulders, trying to help. Its body was light, too light, and riddled with burns. But there was something in its eyes that hadn't faded, a stubborn spark. It struggled to its feet, wobbled, then took one step toward the house. No, Jamal caught it gently. You've done enough. Whatever's in there, it's already gone. But the dog wouldn't sit, wouldn't lie down. Instead, it turned its head slowly, gaze falling on the crumpled porch of the burning house. And then, with surprising clarity, it barked. Once. Jamal looked up and froze. Through a shattered upstairs window, barely visible, behind the flames, something flickered. Not a figure, not a person, just a shape, a faint glint of reflection. Maybe a mirror, maybe a trick of the fire. But in that second he wasn't sure. Something inside him twisted, a memory, a whisper, something long buried and clawing its way back. He stood up. The dog barked again. A firefighter shouted, grabbing his arm, but Jamal pulled away. I need to go in, he said. Are you insane? The firefighter snapped. That floor's collapsing. You go up there, you don't come back down. But Jamal didn't move. There's something there, something left. Noreen stepped forward. You think there's someone I don't know, he admitted. But that dog knew where to look. It brought out the photo for a reason. There might be more. The firefighter cursed under his breath. You've got 60 seconds. That's it. No hero stunts. Inside the house was breathing heat. Each step cracked beneath him, the air thick with smoke and grief. He moved by instinct. This house was still inside his bones, every creak familiar. The staircase groaned but held. He reached the second floor, eyes stinging. The hallway was a tunnel of flame and shadow. At the end of it, Talia's room, or what was left of it. He pushed the door. Ash fell like snow inside. The bed was gone, walls scorched down to their bones. But in the far corner, beneath a half-burned toy chest, was a rusted metal box. Familiar. He knelt, pried it open. Inside, photos, drawings, a charm bracelet, letters, his handwriting, hers. Letters he thought she'd never read. He clutched the box to his chest and ran. He made it out just as another wall collapsed behind him. People grabbed him, helped him down the stairs. He didn't speak, didn't stop until he reached the dog. He laid the box beside it. The dog looked once, one long look, then closed its eyes. Jamal stayed by its side until the fire died. The fire had calmed into a smoldering skeleton, but the silence it left behind was louder than any siren. Smoke hung low, like a veil draped over grief. Jamal sat on the curb with the photograph cradled in his hands, the dog, if it could still be called that, resting beside him, one paw twitching now and then as if dreaming or remembering. His hands trembled. The edges of the photo were burned, warped from heat, but the image was still there. 2 children, one of them was him, the other Lyra. She had died when he was 10. A quiet drowning, a summer river, too deep, too fast. The photo had been the only one their mother kept framed. It had disappeared years ago, during one of her breakdowns. She'd torn through drawers and closets like a woman possessed. They assumed it was gone forever, but now here it was, carried out of fire by a dog no one owned, a dog everyone forgot. Behind Jamal, the rescue crews combed the blackened house. No one found a body, no one found anything human, just smoke and ruin and memory. Neighbors began to whisper, not about the fire, not even about what caused it, but about the dog, where it had come from, why it went inside, how it knew what to carry out, and why it had stopped right in front of Jamal. A low voice cut through the murmurs. That dog used to live with her, with Cinder. Jamal turned. It was old Raina, the librarian. She walked with a cane and smelled of paper and lilac. Her eyes were sharp though and locked on the animal like it was something holy. She was strange, Raina went on. Cinder Marlowe kept to herself, said the dog was her only family. She used to talk to it like it understood her better than people ever could, said it remembered things even she forgot. People thought she was touched in the head, but maybe. Jamal swallowed hard. But this photo, it was in my house, not hers. Raina didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward and crouched painfully next to the dog. Its breath came slow and shallow now. Its eyes half-lidded, blinked as though seeing something far away. She placed a hand on its side, whispering something only it could hear. Then the dog stirred. It stood, wobbling, and turned. Not toward the fire, but toward the street. Toward something only it seemed to sense. Jamal rose instinctively, taking a few steps after it, but it paused, looking back, not waiting, not asking, just looking. Then it moved again. The crowd watched in silence as it walked down the center of the street, smoke curling behind it like a tale of memory. No leash, no hesitation. Jamal followed. He didn't know why, not really, but something deep inside, something buried for years under guilt and forgetfulness, pulled at him. He passed the fire trucks, past the hushed murmurs, past the mailbox still standing at a crooked angle. His shoes crunched on charred gravel. The dog never looked back again. They walked 3 blocks, then 4, and then they reached the river. Had been so long since Jamal stood there. Since that summer, the trees had grown taller, the bank more eroded, but the river still whispered the same way like secrets gliding over stones. The dog stood at the edge. Jamal did too, and in the stillness he remembered. The last time he saw Lyra alive, she'd run ahead of him, shouting that she'd found a turtle. He hadn't followed right away. He was annoyed. She always ran off, always wanted to find something. When he reached the water, she was already gone. Just her sandals stuck in the mud. He'd carried the guilt like a second skin ever since Dot. Now the dog lay down on the same patch of earth. Slowly it stretched its front paws out and lowered its head. Jamal dropped to his knees, not because he understood everything, but because something old and silent had risen in him, a grief long ignored, a love long buried. He reached out and stroked the dog's soot-covered fur. It didn't move, didn't even breathe. He sat with it until the sky turned purple, until the river sounded like it was singing, until the last curl of smoke from the Marlowe house faded into the dark. And in that moment, he whispered the thing that ever mattered. Thank you. The dog's body was still, but the river kept flowing, carrying everything onward, quiet and endless. They buried the dog near the river at first light. No ceremony, no words, just Jamal, Raina, and a silence so deep it felt like it belonged to the land itself. The old librarian had insisted on using her hands, and Jamal didn't argue. They worked quietly, digging into the soft earth beneath the roots of a weeping willow, the river murmuring behind them. When it was done, Jamal placed the photograph, the only one that had survived, beside the dog's still body, folding it just once to fit beneath its paw. He didn't cry. Not in that moment. The tears had already come and gone in the night, washed clean by the river's endless breath. Back in the neighborhood, the Marlowe house stood as a blackened shell. Fire crews had left. The police tape fluttered, more like decoration than warning. People moved slower now, unsure whether to speak of what had happened or to let it all pass unspoken. The fire had taken nothing of value in the end, or so they thought. No lives, no heirlooms, just an empty building, and a dog that shouldn't have mattered. And yet, people lingered at their windows longer than before, left small bowls of water out, without knowing why. Some swore they'd seen the dog before watching their children, following their steps to school, resting under old porches as if keeping watch. Others said they never saw it at all. Jamal didn't explain. Not to them, not even to his mother, who asked gently what had happened that night. He only said, "Something found me," and kissed her forehead, and went on with his day. But something had changed. He started returning to the river, sometimes daily, sometimes after dark. He'd sit on the same patch of earth watching the water shift and fold over itself. It no longer reminded him of loss. It reminded him of what had remained, what had waited all these years, and what had come back not in form, but in meaning. The kind of memory that doesn't haunt but guards. One evening Raina joined him again, bringing with her a worn notebook. She sat beside him without asking and placed it in his lap. "Cinder used to write in this, about the dog, about what it knew," she said softly. "I think you're meant to finish it." Jamal opened the first page. The handwriting was shaky. Looping the ink had faded at the edges, but the first line was clear. He remembers for the ones who forget. He waits for the ones who leave. The final pages were blank. He didn't know what he would write yet, but he knew he would. Not for anyone else. Not for a book, or a story, or even for memory, but to mark the place where something unseen had done what no one else could, returned a part of him he hadn't even realized was still burning. The wind picked up slightly across the river. The willows swayed. Somewhere beyond, a child laughed. Far away, the sound trailing off into the hush of evening. Jamal closed the notebook, placed it gently on the ground. Then, before standing to leave, he did one last thing. He reached down and pressed his hand into the earth, not to take, not to search, but simply to feel the warmth of where the dog had once lain. It was still there, faint but real. The same way the photo had survived. The same way some things don't die, even when the world forgets their names. As he walked back toward the fading light, the river behind him whispering old songs into the dusk, he didn't turn around. There was no need to. The story had returned to its quiet end, and something or someone had finally been carried home.